Good morning, board members, public members, Chair Dr. Mountain. We're still waiting on one board member. Would you like to wait a few more minutes, or would you like to start with the meeting?
I'd like to defer this to Ms. Yamaguchi and see what her recommendation is.
This is Elaine Yamaguchi. I would suggest we give the last board member about 5 more minutes and then start.
Thank you. Before I call roll and establish quorum, I will provide detailed information on how this meeting works. This meeting is being held via WebEx on Friday, August 21, 2020. I will ask board members and staff to mute their microphones to eliminate background noise, and when they are ready to speak, they can unmute. WebEx has a feature to virtually raise your hand, and I will ask board members to use this function after each agenda item if they would like to comment or have questions. If we need a motion, I will call for a motion, and any board members can raise their hand, identify themselves, and make a motion. If you are seconding a motion, please raise your hand, unmute, identify yourself, and second the motion. I will take a roll call vote for each motion. Again, please identify yourself by name each time you speak so our audience knows who is speaking. We are taking public comment on each agenda item. If you wish to provide public comment, click on the Q&A button near the bottom center of your WebEx session. This brings up the Q&A chat box. To request time to speak, make sure the Ask menu is set to all panelists and type, "I would like to make a public comment." Attendee lines will be unmuted in the order the requests are received, and you will be allowed to present public comment. Please note your line will be muted at the end of the allotted public comment duration, which is 3 minutes. You will be notified when you have 10 seconds remaining. Your name is not necessary, but please indicate how you would like us to identify you. For the sake of efficiency, the EO will respond directly to public comment or defer to the appropriate staff person or counsel. For questions directed to the board members, I will either answer the question or direct it to the board members. I will now do an alphabetical roll call to establish quorum. I will ask each board member to respond here after I say their names. Paula Amazola D. Herrera. Here. Alita Carpenter.
Here.
Alita, I think you're muted.
Here? Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
John Durking.
Here.
Ken Maxey.
Here.
Donna Norton.
Here.
Melissa Rubicalva.
Here.
Cheryl Turner. Cheryl Turner. Based on the roll call, we have an established quorum. At this time, I will turn the introductions over to Ms. Elaine Yamaguchi, the Executive Officer of the Board, to introduce her staff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Elaine Yamaguchi, the Executive Officer. With us today, we have our NECs, Beth DeYoung, Cindy Fairchild, Pace Silverman, Jessica Gomez, and Sue Ellen Clayworth. We have a number of our staff here: Geraldine Marcino, Tim Matsumoto, Rose Piers, Jared Howdy, Christine Dano. We have Marie Cordero, Vicki Lyman, and our brand new Chief Antoinette Wood. And I'd like to make a special introduction for our budget analyst and today's moderator, Vicki Saavedra. Madam Chair, that's our staff so far.
This is the moderator, Ms. Yamaguchi, I'm getting some excess feedback from your mic. Thank you.
I'm sorry, were we able to introduce legal counsel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenneth Swenson, Attorney 3, Legal Counsel for the Board.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. Item 4 is the board meeting minutes from the May 22nd, 2022 meeting. Please raise your hand to make a motion to approve the May 22, 2020 meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, excuse me, this is Alita Carpenter.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I can't see an icon that allows that.
Moderator, can you help us, please?
Yes, one moment. Ms. Carpenter, if you
Yes.
scroll all the way down to the bottom,
Yes.
you can, and you click on the little bubble, you should be able to raise your hand.
Which bubble?
It's right next to your mic.
The bubble next to my mic has a camera in it.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Okay, give me 15 seconds so I can locate it for you on my end.
Hi, good morning. This is Donna Norton. Sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask this question because there are 3 people with hands up. So who will we since we're using that feature, who will be looking for the hands? Because I think that there's probably some of us that can help Ms. Carpenter locate that button, because obviously we have.
Donna, where is the button?
So if you click your participant menu open, so those would be the blue button with the little person head. If you click that, it will come up on your right-hand side. And then at the bottom, after the participants are listed, you'll see a lower hand, you'll see a feedback, a button to give whatever kind of feedback, but it's right there. It's actually not going to be on those larger buttons that show up at the bottom of the screen.
So I
Thank
do
you,
see
Donna. Thank you, Donna.
This is the moderator. On my end, I'm not able to see the raised hand feature either. So I am getting technical help from Solid real quick.
I can see Mr. Durking, Ms. Rubalcava, and Ms. Norton all with a raised hand. Did one of you want to make a motion to approve the May 2020 meeting minutes?
This is John Deerking. Thank you. I would move the minutes of the May 22nd, 2020 meeting as reviewed if there are no errors or omissions.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Melissa Rubicon. I second that.
Is there any public comment?
Would we not take board member comment first?
Sure. If there is board member comment, you can raise your hand or just speak up.
Okay, I think that we're gonna end up just speaking up. So I think it just needs to be noted that there are no actual meeting minutes, that in order to review and approve the meeting minutes, you must have watched the YouTube video. And that is a new feature. At least I didn't get any board meeting minutes.
Ms. Yamaguchi, I think that's correct.
Yamaguchi. Board members, minutes in your packet. They're significantly briefer than you're used to. What we have done is summarized and captured all the action items, and only the action items and not the discussion from the board meeting. And we've attached the link to recording. But there are minutes in the packet with the board's official actions.
Chairperson, we do have a comment from member of the public, Maria Arnott. Would you like for me to unmute her?
Yes, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Marie Arnabit from Concord Career College. I have actually pulled out the meeting minutes from the YouTube. I actually put it in and look at it and read it. So that's how I was able to look at the meeting minutes. You're welcome.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I will do a roll call to establish who is in favor or opposed. Paula Amazola,
Will abstain.
Alita Carpenter,
In favor? Yes, I'm not sure exactly what terminology to use, but yes, I move to approve.
thank you. Mr. Durking,
Yes.
Mr. Maxey,
Yes.
was that yes? I'm sorry, that was clipped.
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Norton,
Yes,
Ms. Rubicalva,
Yes.
and Ms. Turner. Okay. That passes. We'll move forward. Our next agenda item is education reports, recommendations, and possible actions. Education Division report, Ms. Marie Cordera.
Vicky, are you gonna unmute me?
Miss Cordero, you are unmuted, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good morning, board members. Congratulations, Carol and John. Happy to have you here with us in your new positions. Board members, you have my report in front of you. Do you have any questions that I might answer for you?
This is the moderator. I do not see any questions from the public.
This is Cheryl Turner. I'm just trying to verify my mic. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can Ms. Board Member Turner?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board for Ms. Cordera?
I do see Board Member Martin with her hand raised and Mr. Deerking.
Are there questions from the board?
So I guess at this point, my question is, are you going to call? I mean, I don't want to step over someone else. So you've asked us to use the raise hand feature. If we raise our hand, are we waiting for you to call our names before we start speaking? Or I just need to know how we're going to do it. I don't have a question about this. I have a comment about the item 4A that I just went through my notes and realized that I still approve the minutes, although I did want to make a comment about those minutes.
Okay, and I think I will call on people as I see raised hands, if that would be the easiest way. I see your hand is the only one raised at this time.
And so the comment that I wanted to make was about item 4A, and within the meeting minutes, I think it was noted that it was passed about the school pass rates. I just wanted to make a comment that I reviewed the minutes of the previous board meetings. I reviewed way back to the actual board meeting. I just want it to be known that
I didn't think I could, Vicky. Sorry. No, that's fine.
I just wanted to make a statement that I recall having no discussion about changing the quarters from 8 to 4. And I believe that that has been all jumbled in there. I have reviewed all the meeting minutes and I have reviewed the YouTube videos. And I don't see a discussion there. So I just wanted to make that statement regarding 4A meeting minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. We will, since there's no more questions.
This is Cheryl Turner, and I don't know how to use the raise hand function either. Yes, that issue did come up in the education committee about whether or not we voted, and so on that before. And so we were hoping that the staff would come forward with some documentation about that. So the staff, were they able to find anything? Or are they still searching for that information? Or, as Donna says, she doesn't recall that she's looked at her notes and records.
This is Attorney Swenson. The question previously presented to the board was approval of the minutes. And so the discussion at this point is germane to any agendized items. The issue will be taken up later today at the appropriate time, but it's not germane to the prior item, which was simply approval of the minutes.
Oh, okay. I thought we were on the education committee report.
Well, then with respect to the education committee report, I think that's going to be taken up later with the Legislation Regulation Committee.
All right. Thank you.
Donna? Oh, Donna, can you, sorry, I think I had mine on mute. Can you explain to Ms. Turner how to use the hand raise feature? I think it really helped everyone.
Certainly. So if you hold your mouse over the bottom of your screen, you'll see those bubbles there. The bubble that looks like a person for participants.
Yes.
If you click on that bubble, on the right-hand side, a participant list will pop up. At the bottom of that participant list is a raise hand feature.
Okay, yes, very small. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to 5B. This is the Education Division update. Ms. Yamaguchi, would you please provide an update on the Unitech proposal and the Executive Officer review of reports?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is Elaine Yamaguchi, the Executive Officer. 2 items before the board. One, of course, is the ongoing discussion about the use of simulation for clinical experience at the schools and programs, and specifically the Unitech College proposal. Now, we've attached in your packet a cover memo pretty much outlining the situation as a whole and providing basically some questions that I think the board needs to discuss. And then, of course, we've attached the actual Unitech College proposal and our correspondence back to the college. And we also had an inquiry from some members of the legislation, and we've also attached that letter plus our response to that. At the risk of being overly broad, I think the board and certainly the committee have had a lot of discussions about the use of simulation in lieu of or to supplement clinical experience for the student. And this has always been a really interesting conversation, but this year with so many of the facilities closing themselves and not allowing students in to provide their clinical experience, it's become abruptly a much more challenging situation. I think it's fair to say that the board and the staff have usually agreed that in general principle, one of the most central and critical lessons, I think, for a nursing student is to actually work with a live patient, and to graduate a student without any sort of live patient experience presents some problems short-term and very much long-term in terms of patient care, patient safety. But we're operating under very different times. We've never before seen the requests and the need to provide more of their clinical experience via simulation than this year. We think that over the course of probably at least the next year, if not longer, we're going to see that. I think it's fair to say that a lot of simulation is very, very advanced and very valuable. But like anything, the quality and the depth and breadth of that equipment and those experiences vary tremendously, from very rudimentary to exceedingly advanced. I know that there's at least one program that actually works off cadavers. But the fact remains is that for our overarching mission of safety, consumer safety, we do need to, I think, keep this in that core thing in mind. Now, Unitech College specifically presented a proposal to myself and to the NEC, supervising NEC Marie Cordero, which basically suggested and asked to alter their curriculum pattern and suggested that for their first term, their fundamentals, that they be allowed to do 100% simulation and then make up for those hours with hands-on experience in the second and third term. The NECs analyzed this proposal extensively and discussed it amongst themselves extensively. And again, for the reasons before stated, there's a great deal of discomfort with the idea of, one, approving this even in an emergency setting, but two, the proposal itself didn't really quite lay out some definite backfill or other experience later in the term. I think the NECs have also said very clearly that the fundamental period, that first term, this is where all the basic skills are set and laid out and taught. So not have that very first term, that base building term, involve live patient care, it can potentially skew the rest of the experience and clinical hours for the students. So briefly then, you know, the staff can't approve or disapprove the Unitech College proposal, but we also want to make sure that the board is abundantly aware of the fact that if we do approve or disapprove Unitech's proposal, this basically sets a policy, a de facto policy that pretty much any of the other schools would avail themselves of and ask for. Now, as I said, this is a larger policy question, and we wanted to be certain that the board itself discussed this, because this is new territory for BVNPT. So at the very end of the cover memo on page 2, I did list out some questions for the board to discuss, and we can, of course, at the pleasure of the chair, start that discussion now, or we can just defer that to the education committee or the executive committee to bring back to later. But the fact is that, you know, in the meantime, Unitech is looking to construct their programs for their students. It would be good if we could ask them for a bit more work on the exact details of how they would supplement in some patient hours, some patient care hours. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to pause for questions and comments.
Are there any comments from the board? I'm looking for raised hands. I see Ms. Turner has her hand raised. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes. All right. So the board the staff looked at it, and their position is they were opposed to it. I'm not sure. While it seems like we shouldn't rely 100% on utilizing simulations, computer technology, seems to me like it makes sense. We're still in the 21st century, though, that we should be focusing on how we can incorporate some simulation into that to keep up with advances in telemedicine. So I would hope that, you know, at least some percentage, even if it's a small percentage, we can incorporate that into future clinical type programs.
Ms. Yamaguchi, can I?
Unless you want to respond first.
Oh, yes, please. Ms. Turner, those are great comments. And I just want to say that simulation is already a part of the first semester experience for students. But the idea that we would only be in simulation with our students could possibly detract greatly from their experience. I believe that Unitech is basing this on something that has been proposed at the Board of Registered Nursing but I want it on the record that there's a big difference between a student who comes into an LVN program and a student who comes into an RN program. The student who comes into an RN program has anywhere from 2 to 4 semesters of prerequisites. That includes anatomy, physiology, microbiology, psychology, possibly nutrition, possibly growth and development. So they have a background already in human behavior and disease process and some other things that are incredibly important and foundational in nursing itself. The prerequisites to come into an LVN program, although they differ greatly at every school, the basic prerequisites are to be 17 years of age and to have a high school diploma or the equivalent. So schools like Unitech bring students in and then they weave through their program all of the prerequisites that may have been done separately at another type of facility. So to deny students any patient care contact in that first semester as an educator, I think that would do a disservice, first of all, to the student and not provide them the experiences they need. And secondly, to the public in keeping them safe and developing true practitioners. So thank you. And thank you for letting me answer, Ms. Yamaguchi.
Okay, hold on. I never suggested it should be 100%. I'm only suggesting that we incorporate a small percentage. That's all. Patient contact is extremely important. I agree with you. We should continue with that. That shouldn't change. I'm just saying incorporate a little more. That's all.
And I do believe that it is part of the first semester curriculum for most schools at this point.
Supplement your excellent response, Selene Yamaguchi. Ms. Turner, you're 100% correct, even if I can't say 100% for simulation. Our regulations do allow for simulation, and most of the schools do incorporate that all along their curriculum path. BVNPT, unlike BRN, has never set a set percentage of what is allowable, and we've always let the schools design their own curriculum. But this has been an exceptionally weird year in terms of the availability of clinical experience. So yeah, your point is very well taken. And your earlier point, though, is also, I wanted to make sure that that was very clear, is no, the staff has not either approved nor disapproved this proposal because we felt it was so groundbreaking that we want to make certain that the board itself had a really lively, robust discussion of it before. As I said, this is going to set a fairly permanent policy. One thing that I was going to suggest, and this is a very, very long-term process, is that as we go forward in updating all of our regs and all of our statutes, that we may want to consider whether we cap on what is an acceptable level of simulation in the clinical experience. But at this point, we've just been working program by program, case by case. The NECs have been working with all of their assigned programs to really come up with what they feel like, in their expert opinions, is a good caliber, a good diverse amount of education in no one concentration. But as I said, the concern is the concern that the NECs have voiced specifically to the Unitech proposal is having 100% simulation in the fundamental first term. So as I said, I was hoping that the board can have, this is probably not going to be a one-time discussion, I'm certain. So like I said, we wanted to frame these discussions for the board to start discussing now. I imagine it'll go back to the committee, but I also I want to make certain that the schools themselves have enough time to discuss this as well. I know that Unitech and a lot of their advocates have had a lot of conversations with us in the past about specifically this. And as I said, we would ask the board for some guidance. And this is going to take some time to come to what we think would be a permanent solution, and or a permanent solution with a and if in event of state or federal emergency, fill that solution. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Yamaguchi. Are there other questions about this issue at this time?
So Ms. Turner, so I would suggest maybe it be referred to Education Committee and we can discuss. Dr. Mountain can bring out, what type of simulation programs are currently in existence. And then we can start to talk about whether or not we should have caps on that or not. And, well, we should have caps, but what that cap should look like. And,
Thank you, Ms. Turner. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Ms. Yamaguchi?
Thank you, Ms. Turner and Madam Chair. That is an excellent suggestion, and that's exactly what I think would be a terrific step forward. And I was also going to suggest that there are, as I said, a number of schools that they're doing a terrific job with simulation, and we could very easily have a best practices panel discussion from some of them, and I think really explore the parameters there. So I think that's a terrific idea. I would suggest that we put this on the education agenda for their next meeting, and possibly I think for the executive committee agenda. Just I think kind of look for a time frame for how we should approach this moving forward in terms of action. Madam Chair.
Ms. Norton, I see that you have your hand raised. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, please. So I agree with what you said about the LVN. The student coming into an LVN program is likely slightly different than a student coming into the RN program, and better. The RN program is probably better able to embrace simulation and to a higher success level. Having went through an LVN program myself, we had both. I remember when I first started, I started my LVN program as a very special program in upstate New York. I started my LVN program when I was only 16 years old. And we first encountered simulation in our program. We encountered simulation just to get us familiar with technique and to get you past the handshaking stuff when you were going to start something, because it was easier to feel like you were doing that on someone that you weren't going to hurt before you tried to do it on someone that you did hurt. We even gave injections to each other, actual injections. So I say all that to say that I believe that there's a place for both. I believe that simulation and it is one piece to get you ready to actually interact with a patient live, but it is so important to have live patient interaction, because no matter how much you try, and these simulators, my God, they're just amazing what you can do with them now. But it's still being controlled by someone else. So I think that it's a good idea to have the Education and Practice Committee take a further look at this. Although I would like it to be brought back to the full board for a full board discussion. We have public members on the board that would have vital input, looking at things from a different perspective. And then I also thought that we were going to have someone from Gurnick that would speak today related more to this presentation. Is that not so?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I guess we'll see as we move forward, but I really appreciated your comments, Ms. Norton, especially your experience as an LVN student, and the fact that you were so young when you went through school, that learning to work with patients is incredibly important. So thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, actually, the representative from Unitech, not Gurnick, the representative from Unitech is here. He does have his hand raised. So,
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. totally messed up. Gernick has been on the brain, so I did in fact mean Unitech. Thank you for correcting me.
If I may interrupt, this is the moderator. I do see 2 public comments. When you're ready for the public comments, please let me know and I'll unmute one by one. Board President, are you
Oh, to
ready?
the moderator, do you need me to say to go ahead for public comment? Please
Yes,
go
please.
ahead for public comment.
First public comment we have is Maria Arnobet. I am going to unmute her mic.
Conectado naman.
Public member, you are unmuted. You'll have 3 seconds to make your comment, at which time you'll be given a gentle reminder at the 10-second mark. You are ready. It appears that the public member is having technical difficulties. There's a second public member, Abdel Yosef. I am going to unmute his microphone.
Thank you, and I would like to thank Ms. Yamaguchi for presenting our proposal this morning. And I want to thank the board members for, exploring this opportunity. I just want to clarify that our proposal has 2 parts. One speaks to the term 1 fundamental clinical hours, and what we propose is not to use 100% of simulation, but also, of course, to use hands-on practice on the skills lab with the mannequin, and as one of the member mentioned, with students role play. But that's one part of our proposal, and we would love to get into a more discussion. We thought just to start the conversation on this item, and this item can be used maybe in state of emergencies. If we have a state of emergency where clinical partners are unable to take students, we use that in term 1, but then when it's business as usual, we can go back to more clinical hands-on direct patient care hours. So that's section number 1 in our proposal. The second section, which is more important, is the telehealth section. And I want to mention that the telehealth in 2017, National Workforce Study conducted by the NCSBN, which is the National Council State Board of Nursing, shows that 54% of the licensed vocational nurses reported providing service using telehealth. Imagine that was in 2017. In 2020, during pandemic, if we conduct the same study, most likely we'll see maybe 100% of the vocational nursing of the LVNs have been engaged in a telehealth. How many of you have used virtual clinic visits? So, and I want to speak to that and how important to integrate telehealth into the way we teach our nurses. Because our nurses should be prepared for the future. If we educate our nurses the way we were educated, we will be behind. We should prepare nurses for the future. And currently, as we speak, most of the nurses are using telehealth daily. And it should be actually required, not just a percentage. It has to become a requirement that LVNs should train to use telehealth before they walk out of, before they go to work, because that's going to be the new normal. It shouldn't be actually called telehealth. It should be called health, because currently that's what it is. It is the new normal, and we will be happy to participate in the education committee and provide more details. I know I have a short time here, and I'm trying to be as concise as possible, but I'm
Public
definitely.
member, this is the moderator, public member, Yosef, your time is.
All right, thank you.
We do have one other public comment. I will unmute her mic now. Her name is Maria.
Thank you, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
Moderator can
everybody.
hear you.
Thank you for allowing me to make comments. Again, my name is Maria. I'm from Concord Career College, San Bernardino. First of all, thank you everybody for your time, for allowing us to comment. Would like to say that it's been very challenging for us as directors of nursing to make that partnership and get back our students to the direct patient care. But one thing for sure is that the help of the NECs had helped us pivot and make those changes as we go along. Every county is different, but wanting to let everybody know that the partnership that we have with our NECs and our clinical partners, as it presents itself, will always give us that opportunity to look back and see what else we can do. As far as telehealth nursing, I understand where we are coming from because of the scope of practice. This is something that's the new norm, but we also have to be very careful of the fine line of where we are at as far as the clinical objectives that we have to meet with regard to the curriculum. And that's all that I have to say, but thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you for those comments. I see Miss Amazola de Herrera. Would you like to make a comment? Your hand is raised.
Yes, my hand is raised. Thank you so much for the public comment. I really appreciate hearing from our different stakeholders, and I do think that the right thing for this topic is to go back to the education committee where we can discuss this. I would like to invite Unitech to please come to the education committee and present to us and the plan that you are proposing. And in addition, I would like to ask those members on our board if they could please comment, the board members who are in the field of nursing or um, um, psychiatric technician. Sorry, I need more coffee. Sounds like, and have them comment on what can we do in this state of emergency. I'm in public health, and as a public health professional, what I hear from colleagues that are work in clinics and hospitals is that there is a great need to increase the nurses, the LVNs, and the technicians, because our healthcare system is overburdened right now with the pandemic, and there's a need for our nurses to be well, in that they're working long shifts and they're working multiple shifts past their their full-time status. And I know that I live in Los Angeles County, so I know that Los Angeles County is experiencing this, but I would like to hear what others are experiencing, because we do need to have a plan in this emergency state that we currently are in. I know, I hear from Dr. Mountain what is the best case scenario under best situations, but we are not in a best case scenario, and we are not in the best situation, and we need to make sure that we continue to strengthen the healthcare for all of us so that we all have a future. Because if we don't have a strong healthcare, we're not going to be in good shape. So we need to think about what we can do now during this state of emergency so that we are all protected as a community and that we can all continue to have a future. So basically, I would love to hear for those who are in the field, what is something we can do as a board to help our nurses, our technicians get the training they need and enter the workforce.
Thank you, Ms. Amazola de Herrera. I do want to respond to you just a little bit, and that might help you to feel better. Right now, over the course of the summer, Health Workforce Institute sponsored the creation of, I believe it's 3 telehealth modules that can be used in a variety of healthcare programs that can be made to help introduce students to the concepts of telehealth. And I'm sure that that is something that the Education Committee probably should take a look at, of how that will fit in with the regulations, not just for the pandemic, but for the next many years, because what's projected is we will never go back to doing healthcare the way we've done it before the pandemic, that telehealth is here to stay. So certainly that has to be looked at in light of LVN education. And thank you very much for your comments. That was excellent. Ms. Yamaguchi, do you have any other response?
So that, because the comments were extremely well taken. In terms of telehealth, actually, the governor has spoken a number of times on the need to develop telehealth as a modality. One thing that BVNPT must do soon, and it should absolutely be begun in the Education Practice Committee, is really discussing telehealth in view of the LVN and PT scope. There's a number of places where this absolutely could be just a wonderful resource to supplement healthcare delivery system as a whole. We're absolutely interested in developing this as a new modality, but as I say, carefully tailoring it to the appropriate scopes. In terms of, and Ms. Amazola de Herrera, you hit it right on the head. We are not dealing with normal times. We do absolutely need to develop our curriculum to fit the age we're in terms of all the technology available to us. But we do need to have some special considerations for times of state and federal crisis like we're in now. So anyways, as I said, extremely well taken. And I wanted to just thank Dr. Yosef for his comments. We're really looking forward to continuing this conversation. Maria, also, thank you so much for recognizing the fine work of the NECs. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Yamaguchi. I believe that we are already on item 5C. We've really been discussing the Educational Committee report, as all of these things are linked together. Oh, I see 2 other comments. I apologize.
This is the moderator, Board President. There are a few other public comments. I will.
All right, let's take public comments and then we can come back and do, I see 2 more comments from our board members as well.
One moment. Public member, Janice Holt. Your mic is unmuted. You have 3 minutes to make a comment, at which time the 10-second reminder will be given to you. Briefly, I would just really like to make a comment for the public audience. If you could please lower the raised hand once you've made your comment, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Hi, this is Janice Holt from Unitech College, and I had just a question, please. If the item regarding the telehealth and the simulation time is moved to the Education Committee, would we be allowed a longer time period to present our proposal and discuss the items? Or would we be restricted to the same 3-minute time limit? Thank you.
There will still be a time limit at the Education Committee meeting, but for this meeting, with so many possible comments, that's why we've restricted it to 3 minutes. Ms. Yamaguchi, do you have additional information for that?
Yes, for the Education Committee, I think we could certainly come to a more lenient time frame for presentation. And certainly if we were asking a program to present a proposal, we wouldn't be very strict on a 3-minute thing. But let me work with the chair and we'll discuss how we can best structure that meeting. But no, 3 minutes is, you're right, that's a little unreasonable.
Other public comments, please?
Yes, one moment. Public member with initials BM. I am unmuting your mic. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Baylor Meza from Northwest College and Glendale Kirk College. I want to allude to some of the comments some of the board members made. I'm very encouraged by the dialogue of bringing the education and scope of practice of the licensed vocational nurse into the 21st century, as some comments have made. Some board members have already talked about that simulation should be a percentage. I would like to respectfully request the board provide guidance to schools in a more uniform fashion. Currently, there's a wide range and disparate range of approvals of percentages of simulation, from school to school, even within a school system, and from NEC to NEC. I think it'd be very helpful for this dialogue at the Education Committee to take place, as one of the board members suggested, that a certain percentage of simulation be a part of the instructional plans for vocational nursing education to continue to provide safe and competent nurses to their workforce, but also to equip them with critical thinking skills pathways during the learning teaching process that simulation provides in a safe environment before they have to make those critical decisions in a live patient. And currently it's very confusing and disparate. And so for board consideration, either now or at the Education Committee meeting, I would love for, as one of the board members suggested, for a discussion to make a percentage of simulation uniform for all nursing programs. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there other comments?
Yes, there's one other. Public member Paula Richards, your mic is unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Paula Richards. I hope you can hear me. Been around nursing a really long time, and there is nothing like this COVID. Reminds me, though, that perhaps we tend to look at it from our history, and perhaps we should look more to our future. And this obviously requires a paradigm shift. It's good, and I'm happy that the board is discussing this. However, I would like to remind everybody that this has been going on for 5 months. The schools have had little guidance for 5 months, and there's really no end in sight. So while I too believe that a nurse should not be graduated without real life patient experience, I know that in Unitech's proposal of the first semester, which is basically fundamentals, which includes bed baths, ambulation, et cetera, our LVNs need that background, but more information and theory and patient care takes place in more advanced semesters than in the fundamentals portion, which is a different period of time. And so I'd like to think that with a new mind, I would consider that simulation during fundamentals would be appropriate education and would not affect the eventual outcome for our students. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And I see, Ms. Yamaguchi, you have your hand raised.
But I also would like to point out that Ms. Norton has had her hand raised for quite a while.
All right, Ms. Norton, should we speak with you first and then Ms. Yamaguchi?
I suspect that Ms. Yamaguchi wants to respond, so I will let her go first, and I will go after. Although I have had my hand raised for quite a while. Again, I empathize with you. It's very difficult for you to control this meeting and note the hands. Although I think all the board members are trying to be respectful and not just jumping in. So please, Ms. Yamaguchi.
I appreciate it, Ms. Norton. Yeah, I did want to respond both to Mr. Meza and to Ms. Richards. You're right in a lot of ways. Now, I would argue though about setting a uniform percentage. I think really the board is probably much more better advised to perhaps establish a range, because historically BVNPT has really treated every program on a case-by-case basis, and they've really defined their work, and so they've worked with every school because everybody's just a little bit different. The resources they have available, their location, everything is just a bit distinct and different. So even folks like Unitech who have, say, 8 or 9 campuses and they're operating on the same curriculum, we would want to look individually at each program to make sure that the resources match the needs. But I think that's a point well taken, that having, I think, a little bit clearer guidelines set forth for all the programs. Point very well taken. And I think that the last 5 months, you're right, it has been fairly chaotic. And Ms. Richards, I think this speaks to your point as well, that you're right. What we are seeing here is the absolute need for a paradigm shift. And this is something that the chair and I have discussed a number of times, of really, truly looking at LVN and PT education as a whole and bringing it into if not the present, then actually the future. But again, in reflection of the need for, I think, a really good set policy, but also with the ability to adapt in times of emergency. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Yamaguchi. That was very well said. Ms. Norton, I apologize if I didn't see your hand up, and thank you for being so patient. It's your turn.
Well, a couple of things. One, in light of the scope and magnitude of this proposal from Unitech, and the fact that it is a long time coming and we do need to think about our future, I would like to recommend that we perhaps have a special meeting for Unitech to present to us. My fear is that if we roll it into the Education and Practice Committee, the Education and Practice Committee has other things they have to also do within that meeting, and that we will not be able to give it the time that it actually deserves. Because I do think that this is a very important topic and there are so many moving parts. well, I can agree with Ms. Yamaguchi that there should be somewhat of a schools being treated on an individual basis. I think that there does seem to be, there has to be at least some consistent recommendation, because we wouldn't want to get into a situation where we have some students that are going to a school that has less resources, getting a different education than students that are going to a school that has more resources. And of course, that always happens, but we shouldn't be setting it up to happen that way. Our students should get the same basic level of education no matter where they're going. So I would like to recommend that we actually do a special meeting for this presentation, or we don't place anything else on the agenda for the Education Practice Committee, so that we can actually have a discussion related to it. It's difficult enough that we cannot meet in person and that we're having to do this via WebEx, which adds another layer of understanding, and it's more time consuming. And so please consider having a special meeting for this discussion with the Education and Practice Committee.
Thank you for that excellent suggestion. I think this is a topic that bears a lot of discussion and consideration, and certainly that is something that needs to be taken into consideration, is a meeting to discuss this very topic. So thank you very much. Ms. Yamaguchi, I see your hand is still raised.
And yes, I wanted to just echo what you just said. Ms. Norton, that's a terrific idea. And because the committee does have a great deal of regular business to go forward, I think a special meeting of the committee, or even the board as a whole, to discuss this very, very big topic, that would be great. And I'll work with the chairwoman to set something up as soon as we possibly can.
Excellent. I believe that we are ready to move on to the Education Committee report. That would be 5C. Are there any other comments? Ms. Yamaguchi, I see your hand is still raised.
Yes, Madam Chair, I wanted to remind you that there was actually an item under the exercise 5B2 on decision-making process.
This is the moderator. We have one final public comment.
Thank you very much, moderator.
I will unmute the mic now. Public member Maria, your mic is unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yamaguchi, I would like to again thank you for being able to listen to us and what our needs are. And I would like to support and give that recommendation again that, you know, every county again is different, and I would like to emphasize that. And I believe the most important thing is to really look at what is presented to us in our own county and really not affect those others that have a different situation. But the most important thing that I can think about is, as long as we can meet the requirements on how to prepare the students and setting that and capping that certain percentage for them to be able to function effectively and safely in a real world environment and giving patient care, I believe that should be our main goal. And so having again to cap it evenly for all schools, it's something that we all have to reconsider. So I definitely support and greatly appreciate your ability to flex and pivot with all these challenges. As a healthcare worker myself, was actually also, aside from what I'm doing as a program director, I'm also in the bedside. Shortage of nurses is out there, but the efficiency of safe administration and delivery of what our nursing vocational students will be doing is a great deal for all of us to prepare them in the real environment. Thank you for the ability to say those things to everybody.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Yamaguchi, do you have some additional comments?
Madam Chair, I was just ready to respond to the second item at your pleasure.
Right now, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Item 5B2, Executive Officer Review of Reports. So as the board knows, historically, there are so many decisions that come through the programs, through the NECs, through the SNEC, and through the executive officer. Now, historically, a number of the, I hate to put it like in the way I will, but the very non-controversial, simple decisions have stopped with the executive officer. Anything that really, I think, requires the committee and the board to weigh in on have gone from the executive officer over to the committee and then to the board. I think this has been a very good practice overall. We've run into a few wrinkles here and there, mostly in this time of pandemic, but generally speaking, I want to just briefly discuss the practice itself. This was delegated, as I think Mr. Swenson described this yesterday, that this practice was delegated and basically assigned and moved forward back in the early to mid 90s. And this is a little bit embarrassing, but since none of the staff, with the exception of our NECRAs, were around that long ago, and because of the, I don't want to put it too bluntly, the fragility of record keeping, we have not been able to establish a specific vote or board action delegating that responsibility. But as I said, it's been longstanding practice. When I assumed this job, I actually wasn't told that this was anything different or new or out of the ordinary, and I had assumed. Now, as I said, generally speaking, we're talking about very, very not controversial, simple decisions like a program that has no violations or very simple violations. New class, no new class, curriculum updates and revisions, approval of the program review survey, things of that matter that, like I said, are not presenting any large amount of discussion or even doubt. So as I said, I think it's been a very helpful process. It certainly streamlined the board's operations, and it's also had a really good effect on the schools themselves. In this way, the executive officer review is held twice a month usually, and which means that for all those decisions, the schools aren't waiting for a month, 2 months, 3 months for the committee and or board to make a decision. So it's been, I think, very helpful overall. Now, are there some things we need to work on? Absolutely. I think in light of the need for, I think, increased transparency, one thing that I would certainly recommend is that we prepare that report for the committee and then the board. We've attached a sample of what that would look like in that packet behind the cover memo. This basically outlines this past quarter of what stopped with the executive officer decision. Now, again, this has been an extraordinary year, and we probably put a few things over to the board and committee that ordinarily we would not. But then we've had a lot more decisions that should not stop with the executive officer. Exactly. Things that we would ordinarily have in ordinary times have just made a quick, responsible review of the documents, the analysis by the NEC, and enabled the school to proceed. Now, as I said, we do think this is a good delegation for the board to make, and we would want the board to refresh that delegation, if you would. But just as a side note, I think, should the board not elect to do this, the packets that you receive for petitioners, we would probably either need to add a second function for these program reviews. I think the board would be looking at something like 25 to 35 additional reports on a quarterly basis, but if we wanted to, if the board elects to do so on that more ongoing thing to facilitate the schools, you'd be probably looking at a similar mail out that we do with disciplinary cases. So I would think probably between 5 and 10, maybe more, program reports to review on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis. So anyways, as I said, I want to bring this before you. We wanted, of course, to make sure that the board and our stakeholders and everybody is absolutely clear on how this decision-making process works. And so we've attached that flow chart that shows currently how things are structured. So starting from when the NEC is working with the program all the way to a board decision. And so it outlines what happens at what phase. So here I would like to pause for questions.
Are there questions from the audience?
This is the moderator. I see one public comment from Mr. Cramp. I will unmute his mic now. Mr. Cramp, your mic is unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Terrific. Thank you very much. First of all, I heard Ms. Yamaguchi refer to some documents. I'm not sure that those were made available or are available. If they are available, I'd like to be able to review them, specifically the flow chart and other documents that the board is considering on this point. Second, and I should just mention to the board, I'm an attorney. I'm here today representing the Gurnick Institute, but separate and apart from that, there really is a fundamental flaw here in this process. There is no, as Ms. Yamaguchi indicated, there's been no delegation of authority to the executive officer by the board. And with that, and also, I'm not even sure, in fact, that the board could delegate the types of things that are mentioned. For example, the ability to approve a start or not approve a start is not something that the board has the ability to, first of all, to do in the first place. And I'm not sure exactly what the circumstances are that Ms. Yamaguchi is referring to where the board might do that. But it's certainly, even if the board had that ability, it's not something that could be delegated to the executive officer. So, and moreover, if there is some delegation that takes place, and from the discussion that we just heard, it doesn't sound like there has actually been that, it would need to be completely transparent. And I'm afraid that is just not what has been happening up until now. I'm aware of at least 3 instances where a nurse education consultant sent letters to programs representing that board meetings took place when in fact no board meeting took place, and that the board took action on something when in fact the board did not take action on something. And it is very troubling to think that a letter could come from a member of the staff that indicated that a board took action doing something when in fact the board never took that action and the board never actually met. The other thing I would just point to is that to the extent that the board is considering this delegation, I would urge you to look at 16 CCR 2503, which really limits the ability of the board to delegate certain actions. And the types of things that Ms. Yamaguchi is describing would clearly not be delegable under that code section. So I just urge you to all take a look at that so that you can be fully informed. Thank you.
Ms. Yamaguchi, would you like to respond to that comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair, of course. First off, Mr. Cramp, the documents are available on our website. It's labeled 5B2. And I apologize if that wasn't, those were posted, I believe last Friday. But your point about transparency is absolutely in bounds. We have been striving to increase and improve our transparency. When we find that there are some problems, irregularities, and even errors, we've been working to fix them. in this case, our AEO and the SNEC have been working since over the past several weeks to update all of our templates, all of our forms, all of our procedures in terms of all the communications with schools and programs. I think there have been some problems and possibly some mistakes. I would also, again, not to belabor a sad point, but the NECs have spent most of the past 5 months. They've spent about 85% of their time working with the program directors and directors of nursing programs to come up with ways to work around and keep schools moving in this challenging time. Has it been the best approach in every case? Probably not, but we're learning every single time. And but mostly, I think it's most important that we just reiterate that this has been a long-standing process and procedure for the board. We have been operating on the assumption that this was delegated many years ago, but this is, again, and since it's been raised, we did want to bring this back before the board to have an open, honest discussion and design a new way to do things if we need to. But also, I think for the board to understand, and really our stakeholders to understand, again, exactly how this process is working. And then, the board can absolutely decide how to change that if they want. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Yamaguchi. Are there further comments from the public?
This is the moderator. I do see Mr. Cram's hand up again. I will unmute the mic.
I'm sorry, I think I didn't unclick the button, but Ms. Yamaguchi, thank you very much for pointing over the document. Sorry, I apologize. I think I checked the website on Friday. It wasn't up yet. Thank you.
Are there additional comments? It looks like Maria Arnobit might have a comment.
I believe her hand is stuck in the raised feature.
Okay, that happens.
It says none so far.
Okay. Ms. Yamaguchi, can I turn this back over to you? Did you have a further report to give us for 2B, or is that the end of the report?
This is the moderator.
Mr.
Do you
First has
see?
raised his hand.
Yes. I will unmute his mic. Mr. Fürst, your mic is unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Mitchell First, and I'm from Glendale Career College and Northwest College. I think that this is a very sweeping type of conversation that needs a lot more consideration and a lot more discussion. Because the fact is that NECs are making very different decisions, school by school, program by program, and as we are talking to our school colleagues, the decisions are radically different, even though the circumstances are exactly the same. And so, in addition, if an NEC makes a decision about, what you're proposing, Ms. Yamaguchi, about a particular class, to admit a class, and the NEC, says, denies it, and, what does the school do after that? Because once it would go to you, as you're kind of proposing here, what is a school going to do, even though the school may totally disagree, with that denial or with the decision of the NEC? It's very problematic because, again, we can't stress enough that that many times the NECs just, don't, make the right call, and I think this is really troubling, that it would just be, an executive officer decision at the recommendation of the NEC without any discussion at the board level, because these decisions that you've outlined here, specifically requesting ongoing starts or admitting a class and that type of thing, affects a lot of things in an institution. People's at stake, and these decisions are many times need a lot more discussion. Thank you so much.
Ms. Yamaguchi, do you have a response to that or other items for 5B2?
Thank you very much again, Madam Chair. Mr. First raises an interesting point, but I want to make this absolutely clear that NECs do not make decisions. NECs evaluate all the information. They work very, very closely with the directors of nursing and their staff, and to come up with the most comprehensive set of information available to make a recommendation based on all manner of things: the availability of resources, adequacy of staff, faculty, the qualifications of faculty. There are so many facets that go into all of their recommendations, and I wanted to underscore the fact of, you're not just talking about a staff analyst. You're talking about somebody who has basically, based on our staff, something like 20, 30, or 40 sometimes years of experience, not just as a nurse, but as a nurse educator. And then I think most of our NECs have been around for BVNPT for several years at this point, possibly excepting Dr. Fairchild, who I think has been here for 2 years. But this is exceedingly expert analysis and exceedingly expert guidance. Quite honestly, I would think that this is very good, well-reasoned information. Now, again, to Mr. First's point, I think in a certain point, you're correct that a lot of decisions should not, and most decisions do not, stop with the executive officer. And anything that I would feel uncomfortable about moving forward with, and at this point in time, anything that involves a denial of any sort is being forwarded to the committee and then the board. I think that's very important, and I think that's really noteworthy at this time, that all things considered, we do want the committee and then the board to discuss, and not to put too fine a point on it, even if a school, I think, has a very, let's call it, different opinion from what that recommendation is, there's always time at meetings for the program. I know that the chair always calls on the program when it's being presented for any decision to provide any kind of comments. And bluntly, even if that process is not resolved, I think, to the satisfaction of the program, there's always an appeal process. There's always the ability to contact the chair or the board president to say, I would really like to reconsider that. And we've always been able to do that. And not to put too fine a point on it, I have any number of conversations with the program owners and their attorneys and lobbyists and legislative offices about their concerns on a weekly basis. So there are all kinds of avenues for input here. So I would consider that and not really, I think, recommend that we codify anything like that. But as I said, our object is not to constrict the flow of nursing students to become nurses. Our object, our overarching mission, is to make sure that those programs are operating safely and completely, and making sure that the students all are getting exactly what they've paid for, what they undertake. So, like I said, and Mr. First, you and I have talked a number of times. Our object here is not to be adversarial. Our object here is to try to create a partnership to move forward. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Yamaguchi. Is there further report for 5B2.
There is not any further report, but it's the pleasure of the board to either move forward to make a motion at this time or to refer it for a longer conversation at either the, I would actually recommend that the executive committee discuss this first and then talk about either a broader discussion via a special meeting or through the policy committee.
I see Ms. Norton also has her hand raised. Would you like to make a comment, Ms. Norton? Ms. Norton?
Yes, thank you. So I think we all have the same desired outcome here, and that is that we do the best for the consumers of California and we are able to produce safe nurses. That being said, we did take a look at this program review process in the Education Committee. I would state that at our, as what is presented here, I would suggest that we take it back to the Education Committee or call a special board meeting to review it further. But it does seem that, I am leaning to be in support of this for the very reason that, and I am aware of Mr. Cramp's opinion that we cannot delegate. However, it would seem a better use of our time if we spend time talking just as a full board or the Education and Practice Committee, talking and working through with schools and that are struggling, as opposed to spending our time with schools that are not struggling, that just need to have an approval process. And I will state I will publicly state, I rely on the NEC's recommendations. They know far more than I do, and I rely heavily upon their recommendations. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for those comments. Mr. Swenson, do we need a motion to move this to a larger meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My recommendation is to take it up at the executive committee and at that point either refer it to a special meeting of the board or the appropriate policy committee.
And does that require a motion?
No, ma'am.
All right, so we will take this up again at the executive committee meeting and then move it to a greater discussion. All right. We are ready to move on to 5C unless there are further comments. Ms. Norton, I still see your hand is up. Do you have a further comment? Okay, thank you.
This is the moderator.
I see your hand is up.
This is the moderator. I do not see any public comments.
Thank you. I see Ms. Turner has her hand up. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, we are aware of the allegations that are being made by the speakers, the public speakers, and we are looking into the matter, and we are taking efforts to address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are ready to move on to 5C, Education Committee Report. Just checking for other comments. All right. Let's see.
Excuse me, Board President. I suspect that this committee report will be lengthy. Could we request a 5-minute break?
This is the moderator. I will pause the recording, and which time we can come back in 5 minutes.
Why don't we make that a 10-minute break so people can do what they need to do?
Okay, 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Return at 10:47.
Was that the moderator?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
I talked to Elaine early this morning. I need to step away. Well, there's a lot of feedback. I just need to step away from the meeting for about 20 minutes. I nominated my faculty for a award which they're receiving, and I just want to be able to see them get it. And Mr. Durking has graciously agreed to take over my role during that time. And so I need to leave about 5 minutes to 11. Can we make note of that?
Yes, ma'am, I will do that.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Durking. I appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
This is the moderator. Whenever you're ready to continue, we are being recorded.
Excellent. I believe that it is time for the Education Committee report. We have covered quite a bit of what was discussed in the Education Committee meeting. I did want to ask Ms. Yamaguchi if she wanted to address the update on the educational school fee, which was covered, or that legislation, or will that be done during the leg-reg portion of the meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we had anticipated discussing that in the Ledge Regs Committee report, but I did actually want to make a small request. If, with the pleasure of the board and the chair, we do have representatives from DCA's Budget and Finance Office who graciously agreed to come and provide some background information on both our fund condition and our moving forward, and of course the budget, the governor's budget and BVNPTs. So with the indulgence of the chair, actually, if you wouldn't mind allowing them to move right ahead, that would be wonderful.
This is the moderator. I have promoted DCA Budgets, Karen Munoz and Matt Nishimini, to panelists. You are able to mute and unmute your own mics.
Before we proceed, this is sorry, this is Donna. I did have my hand up, but I'm a little confused. Are we altering the agenda so to allow this? I'm not opposed to that, but we are coming back to the Education Committee report because we didn't have any. We have not done the Education Committee report yet. I'm confused.
Madam Chair, if I may, yes, Ms. Norton, we are asking the chair at her discretion to authorize a brief rearrangement of the agenda. I do apologize, but as I said, the folks from the budget office are here now, and because it's a really important topic for the board to hear, and because the time that it would be reached on the natural is a little uncertain, I wanted to extend the courtesy of allowing them to go first.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm not opposed to it at all. I was confused about what we were doing because I thought everyone would just move ahead, and I wanted to make sure that we just weren't moving over the Education Committee report.
So,
thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Ken Swenson. I think the procedure then would be to advance item 6A to be heard out of order. Once the presentation for item 6A is made, then we can return to regular order.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. I'd like to advance item 6A And once 6A is completed, we will return to regular order. Ms. Morton, you still have your hand up. Is the budget committee ready to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With us today are Karen Munoz and Matt Nishimine from the Budget Office. And if I could have them briefly discuss our fund condition and the status of the governor on the BVNPT's budget. And they'll actually also try and bring up a little bit of perspective for our future agenda item dealing with our fees. Ms. Munoz, Mr. Nishimine, you can flip a coin to decide who goes to go first.
Hi, this is Matt Nishimine with the Budget Office. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Very good. So we're looking at number 6, page 4. This is the fund condition statement. And this first fund condition statement is the status quo. It has fiscal year 1920 preliminary actuals. We haven't closed the books yet, but these are our closest estimates to date. And then 2021 is what is in the Budget Act 2021. So that is the board's appropriation for 2021. Ongoing, we have modest growth down in the expenditure lines just for typical employee compensation and retirement increases. Do we all see that?
This is Don Norton. I have to be honest with you, I don't know what you're referring to. So is there a way that as you're talking, they can put up on this WebEx what you're talking about so you can refer to it? Or can you give us time to get to the after-school report? What I'm looking at under item 6, the attachments that came here, unless I'm not looking in the correct place, is a analysis of fund condition, and I don't see an item 6. So what item are you referring to? I mean, am I looking at the wrong? Anything that says items.
Elaine Yamaguchi here. The fund condition analysis is appended to the Executive Officer Report number 6. That should be item A under that. It should all be in one large document.
Well, I have agenda item 6, and I had reviewed that. I'm specifically asking since, is it Mr. Nishimine? He asked us if we see it. I do see this report, analysis of fund condition. It's labeled 0779. Is that what he's referring to? I guess is what I'm asking. Oh, I see they're bringing it up now. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Do it that way. Yes. Do it that way. It's much easier. Okay.
So actually, this is the second fund condition statement. There should be another one on the. That's it. So this is a standard fund condition statement. This is the most recent one we have. As I said, the 2019-20 numbers are our closest estimates for the prior year closing. We haven't completely closed the books yet, but this is our closest estimate. for 2021. That is what's in the Budget Act. At the top of this, for those who don't know what this is a fund condition statement. So this shows the revenues and the expenditures, the beginning balance, the revenue, the expenditures from the fund, and then a final balance moving top to bottom and left to right. So this is as the board is currently constituted. The revenues are the current levels. You see it's pretty static, moving from left to right. Down below, under the expenditures, 1111, Department of Consumer Affairs. That's the board's level of expenditures, the 17,480,000. That's what you're budgeted for the 2021 year. And then ongoing, we have modest 3% growth factor, and that accounts for employee compensation and retirement. This does not include any unforeseeable cost increases that may come down. For example, if there was legislation or something that required the board to do something and you needed a budget change proposal, or maybe there were some other extraordinary costs that came down the pipe, this does not reflect that. This is just sort of status quo as it is today. Does anyone have any questions about this document?
Ms. Turner, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Okay, so under revenues, the delinquent fees, are those late fees or cost recovery fees?
No, it's delinquent. So it's generally, there's typically a percentage of delinquencies for most programs, and this is just an estimate. If you look at the prior year, the 255, that was an actual number. And so we've sort of just basically flatlined that. The 258 is just anticipated delinquencies, but we won't know until next year.
Okay, where are the cost recovery fees?
Cost recovery fees are included in other regulatory fees. That's the third line.
Yes.
It's included, cost recovery is included in that line.
All right, great. And this proposed fee increase is based on what amount? Is that based on $5,000 fee per student, or do you know? No, I don't know.
So the fee increase is not reported here. It's going to be on the next fund condition statement that we'll look at. This is just status quo. We wanted to show you that if the board doesn't do anything, if you look at the very bottom, the months in reserve line, you're going to go negative. You see this minus 0.4, the minus 1.9, the minus 3.7.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at.
This document is showing that if you don't do anything, the board's fund is going to go insolvent in the 22-23 year.
Okay.
I always like to just show you what the status quo, what the current situation is, and then we're going to show you what the impact with the new fee amounts are going to be.
All right. Okay, go ahead and explain that.
Okay, so this fund condition statement that you're seeing includes the proposed fee increase effective 7/1/22, and we have it lined at the line in red.
Yes, that's what I was looking at, that document.
Okay, so this is based upon the percentage and the increase that the board is proposing, and it should generate another $4.168 million per year.
Okay. So if we don't have that, it would be consistent with the 17 million. It's kind of small per year.
Yes. So
21.
if we don't do anything, it's going to look like the previous one that we just looked at.
but our expenditures will increase above our current expenditures, is what you're saying, and so we'll be in the red.
So yes, so if we look at the, towards the bottom of the expenditures, under the expenditure and expenditure adjustments, so there's a line 1111, that is the board's appropriation. So in the current year, 2021, the appropriation is 17,480,000. Do we see that?
Yes.
And then there's some other costs. So there's a 246,000. This is a supplementary payment. This is a bargaining agreement that was cut a few years ago by the governor, and so it's an unfunded liability, and so we're paying into that as well. There's another line below that, 1014. This is general statewide pro rata. This pays for the governor's office, Department of Finance, the Secretary of State, centralized services such as that we also have to pay in. That is a percentage that is based upon a percentage of the revenues that the fund generates per year.
I see.
So all told, in 2021, the board's expenditures are 18.74 million, which, as you've noted, is about $1 million more than the revenues that are coming in. So we call that a structural imbalance, where revenues are less than expenditures. And as a result, the fund will go negative in the foreseeable future.
So you're with DCA, or are you with the BVNPT? I missed it.
Yeah, so my name is Matt Nishamini. I'm with the DCA Budget Office. My colleague Karen Munoz, who's a budget manager, she's having microphone problems, so I'm just stepping in. I've been with the Budget Office for about 5 years. I was with the Department of Finance prior to that. I currently manage all the regulations, and so since the fee increase will be done regulatory, I was asked to join this and participate in this meeting.
So DCA is encouraging this fee increase.
So DCA, we don't opine on what we do is we analyze what the numbers are. We report what the numbers are. If the board doesn't do anything, the board will go insolvent, and that you can't do that. So the board does need to take some sort of action. Now, when you have a structural imbalance, you have two options. You can either increase your fees or you can reduce your expenditures, and that is the purview of the board.
Has your office made any analysis regarding where we could decrease and still maintain efficient operations?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Has the budget office made any analysis about what expenditures could be decreased and still allow us to maintain efficient operations? I mean, I know that's for the board to do as well, to give input, as well as the executive staff. But I'm just wondering if there's been any analysis by the budget office on this.
No, we've not done that, and that's typically not the purview of the budget office.
All right. Okay, thank you.
So essentially what the budget office does is just reports the numbers. So to the extent this 4.168 million does materialize, it will eliminate the structural imbalance. And we see that towards the bottom line, where now we don't see any negatives. We see it kind of going along at 2.6, 2.8. And we think that that's, prudent reserve. Anywhere from 3 to 6 months is a prudent reserve. So you guys are kind of along that lower level. So that is fine. Assuming there are no other unexpected expenditures that come down in the future.
So this is Dawn. I'm just going to jump in here. The proposed fee increase, I just want to make sure that that I'm on the same page. The proposed fee increase was the fees placed on the schools correct?
So the fee increase is actually in issue number 8, and it does not include the schools.
So the proposed fee increase that you've highlighted here is an increase on the licensees?
It's an increase to the current fee structure. That's correct.
I see Ms. Yamaguchi with her hand up. Do you have a response to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Ms. Norton, the fee increase proposal that you see in red, that is the outside estimate, the top level estimate that we are recommending the board authorize staff to start the regulatory process to increase applicant licensee and all the other associated. This number does not include the school fees, as that's a statutory change, and we won't be able to pursue it until next year, reconvenes. But this is a number to discuss in terms of what our fees are and what the numbers would look like.
Okay, so I do recall that there was we had talked about increasing fees on the schools, and that was going to require statutory. So what we're seeing here is the amount of fee increase needed in order to remain solvent. Is that what we're seeing here? And that fee increase, we will have to discuss. I mean, how do we get that fee increase? But the bottom line is this a fee increase to the licensee?
It would be. I beg your pardon. Yes, what this represents is right now a proposed fee limit, actually, that would go forward. It would be on the licensees and applicants. There are a few other small associated fees, continuing education, for example, but those are very, very small changes. And this proposal basically asks the board to allow staff to start the regulatory process. Now, a number of things can happen in the coming months while we work through that process. The school fees, for example, which we hope would bring the applicant licensee fees increase down a ways and or change the date of implementation.
So
do we have a breakdown of, so if I'm following correctly, you're asking the board to authorize moving towards increasing the fees on the licensees that would total this amount. Do we have a breakdown of how much that would increase the licensees? I'm assuming this is application and renewal fees.
Yes, Ms. Norton, this is closed in the legislation and regulatory committee report. There's a chart.
Can you just tell me how much that is so I don't have to flip over to that? Since we're discussing it here?
Certainly. It would be approximately $55 per license period.
I'm sorry, how much did you say?
$5.
$5?
$55, sorry.
$55, okay.
So as Executive Officer Yamaguchi said, there is a list, there's a chart, because there's a bunch of fees that are going to be increased. So currently, all of the fees are set regulatorily and statutorily, and the regulatory level is below the statutory cap. This proposal will increase the fee levels regulatorily, but not to the cap levels. You're still within your cap, but it will increase them. And so for a full listing, I would have you go to item number 8.
Thank you, Ms. Norton. I see you still have your hand up. Are there further questions or comments? Are there comments from the public?
The moderator, I do not see any comments from the public at this time.
So this is Matt again. I also wanted to make one clarifying comment about the memo that begins this, that starts this issue number 5. In the memo, it reads that there's a 9% savings, target savings that's been issued by the governor, and it mentions that the funds would be redirected towards general fund costs, and that's not the case. The funds would just remain within your within your fund. They're not going to be swept or transferred to any other fund.
Thank you. I see no further questions from the board. Are there any further questions from public comment? Oh, Donna Norton, I see you have your hand up again.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that thank you for that breakdown. I do recall having these discussions in the past, and I will just say that I will own my own shortcoming here. It's very difficult the way we get these agenda items. I looked at agenda item 8 and I saw the report and didn't realize all that other stuff was underneath of it. So I will own that. I do recall having these discussions in the past. I just recall that we were trying our hardest not to increase licensee fees because they're already so high. So I just wanted to make that statement. And then also I want to clear up one. I thought cost recovery was not included in any budgets because it's something that we can't rely on. I mean, that's what's been reported in the past. So I didn't know we were including cost recovery as a line item.
So it's not a good practice to count on cost recovery just for that. It's hard to budget around cost recovery, but typically there are trend lines. There's deficiency trend lines that boards can use to assist with their budgeting. But to count on that revenue, it's not a good idea. That's correct.
Okay, are there any further questions about number 6A, the budget?
Yes. So although
I'm sorry.
See it in the proposed budget, we should see it in our financial statements elsewhere, which we're not reviewing here today, right?
This is the moderator.
Sorry, I don't think I understand the question. What would we be saying? What do you?
So I've requested, I've asked where is cost recovery revenue listed, income listed in the past for a couple of meetings. So I'm still trying to ascertain where I would see that. So yeah, I guess we couldn't necessarily rely upon it in a budget, but I should be able to find it in our income statement. And I guess we'll review that at another time, correct? someone can point that out to me then. I hope.
Yeah, the budget office can certainly provide the board with a list of all the revenues and all the revenue streams, and the cost recovery would be in that. We're closing out the 2019-20 fiscal year, and once that's closed, we can provide that to the board, and you can see that clearly.
Love to see it. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
I do see budget, DCA budget Karen Munoz with her hand raised.
Thank you. Ms. Munoz, go ahead.
It appears that her mic is not working.
All right. Seeing no further comment, no more hands raised. Nope. I still see Ms. Munoz with her hand raised. I apologize that you can't get through. I think we will go back to our original discussion. We were on, 5C, the Education Committee report. I think the next part of that report, before we actually get into talking about the schools, is Ms. Yamaguchi, do you want to address anything about the final thing, which was the rulemaking revisions concepts, or would that be part of the Ledge-Reg report?
Madam Chair, yes, the actual discussion of the rulemaking will take place in the Ledge and Regs report.
Thank you. Then are we ready to move on to consideration of the schools who came before the Education Committee? I think let's do that. The first one.
Excuse me. This is Matt again. Karen just called me, and she just wanted to make a point before we move on. May I?
Yes, please.
So, yeah, Karen was having a hard time with her microphone, but she just wanted to note that expenditures, the question came up earlier about where we could cut some of the expenditures. If you look at the fund condition statement in 18-19, the board spent about 15.8 million, quite a bit less than what's currently budgeted, and certainly what the board spent last year. The board spent 18 million last year. The difference is that there are a couple of things that are factoring into this. One is that the board is more fully staffed. In the past, the board had run a vacancy rate close to 20%, and staffing is the biggest chunk of a board's budget. So that's the first thing. To the extent the board is fully staffed, we're not going to see any salary savings. And the second thing is that AG costs, Attorney General costs have gone up. There was a rate increase, a significant rate increase at the beginning of the year, which increased AG rates, but then also to the extent that the board is putting forth more cases at the AG, then costs are going to go up too. So in 1920, the board was nearly fully expended. I think there was savings of about $65,000 on $18 million in spending.
Thank you. Any further questions with that final report? Are there any public questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on and we'll consider the first. Are there any other comments from the Education Committee members before we move on to the schools that had recommendations? Okay, I see none. So let's move on to the first one on our list, request to increase class enrollment size, American Career College. Anaheim Vocational Nursing Program, Dr. Fairchild, Education Consultant. I have to ask, Ms. Yamaguchi, did we agree that that Dr. Fairchild will still give a brief summary at these meetings, or are they to look at the recommendations of the committee? I know we discussed this at the last meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the consensus was that that the NECs would respond to direct questions on her report, but not rehash the report itself.
So can I ask if there are any questions regarding the American Career College Anaheim Vocational Nursing Program that you'd like to direct to Dr. Fairchild? Are there any public questions or comments?
This is the moderator. I do not see any public comments at this time.
It does not look like there are any comments from the board members either. So, Mr. Swenson, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Donna. I do have a comment, I think, but this is very difficult to do and it's going really fast. I'm trying to flip back between my education committee notes and these notes because I did notice that there were some differences. American Career College came before the board, and I believe this was we were questioning why they came before the board because are they not on provisional? They came to the Education and Practice Committee, but we weren't exactly sure why. Is that the correct one?
Dr. Fairchild, are you able to address this?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The reason for bringing them to the Education Committee and onto the board was they had requested a increase in class size. When it was brought to the executive officer for review, it was requested to be brought to Education Committee because at the time they did not have the resources. Their next class that would be affected by this will not be until January, therefore giving time to make sure that they do have the resources when the class starts in January.
Mr. Swenson, do we need a motion on this?
Madam Chair, this matter came out of committee with a motion. So there is a motion pending.
So there is a motion pending, and does the board need to vote on that motion? Second that motion.
Okay, when it comes from committee, the motion is made and seconded. So there's no need to do that. There should be discussion, public comment, and a roll call vote on the motion coming out of the committee, which was to accept the recommendations of the EC and have the board adopt it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, we're at the point where we could ask for a roll call vote to accept the recommendation of the NEC. Is that correct?
At this point, the motion is made, is before the full board. There is an opportunity then for board member comment and discussion and public comment, after which a roll call vote can be taken on the motion.
Thank you so much. I will open the floor to board member comments. Ms. Turner, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, so I just want clarification on the recommendations of the NEC. All right, so first of all, it looks like the school is already on provisional because it's an item requesting reconsideration of a provisional approval. So are they on provisional?
No, this program is not on provisional. The recommendation is to deny their class start and then to put it on the agenda for the November board meeting to review their resources and make a recommendation to increase class size or not.
Okay, so what is item 2 on the agenda?
Place the program on the board's August 22nd, 2022 agenda for reconsideration. That should have been for, I'm sorry, that is an error. That should be not there.
Okay, so we're going to delete that one. All right, and they are already approved to be allowed to accept 50 students, but they're requesting the opportunity to admit 60 students instead.
Correct.
All right, I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, this is Donna. I guess I have a process question. The problem that I'm having is I fully understand that when something comes out of the education committee, it comes out having been moved and seconded because we dealt with it there. I'm fully aware of that process. And then it comes to the full board, and the full board should just be able to assure that the education committee looked at it and everything was kosher. The problem that I'm having is we have two conflicting things here now, because the recommendations that came out of committee on the agenda items from the committee, 5C, do not match what is on the agenda. They've changed. So I don't know what process we're using now. If you look at item 5CA for consideration to increase class size, it is not the same recommendations as what is on the agenda.
This is Paula Amazola, and I am trying to toggle between these two documents. And you mean 5.C.A is the. Can you clarify the name of these two documents that you're looking at, Donna, please? Thank you.
Donna?
I'm sorry, I was doing a whole lot of talking. I'm looking at 5CA, because I believe that's the agenda item that we're on, correct? 5C?
Yes, we are looking at, are you looking at 5C.1 American Career College?
Yes, I am looking at that. And when I look at that, but then I look over on the approved agenda for today, if you go to the approved agenda for today,
yes,
under education reports, 5C1 American Career College, what is here on this approved agenda does not match what is on the Education and Practice Committee. So the recommendations of the Education and Practice Committee, I don't know which one we're going on. And that is going to be the same for, if you look at the approved agenda for today, it's going to come up again in the Gurnick Academy. It's going to come up again in Southeast. I don't know why, and that's why I'm asking for a process question here. Why are on the approved agenda for today's meeting, are these listed? Are we taking them out of Education and Practice Committee, or are we dealing with them? And so that the other board members know which one to be looking at.
Ms. Yamaguchi, can I turn this over to you for a minute? And I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. John Durkin just for a few minutes here while I have to step out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Yamaguchi, I believe Madam President directed the question to you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Yes, I know, Ms. Norton, it does seem to be very unclear, and we've been wrestling with the way we construct these agendas, and I apologize that, this is, of course, an ongoing process. We did not, perhaps, identify as clearly as we should have what were recommendations coming out of committee and what were not. So Dr. Fairchild is summing up the current recommendations based on further conversations with the program, I believe. And so, as I said, the motion itself, you're right, that when the motion is coming out of committee, it does not require a second and goes directly to the board floor. Anything that did not come out of the committee, it does require a motion and a second and is subject to a lot more robust of a discussion. Now, again, as I said, as we've been trying to make our agendas more robust, I think we've managed to make it a little harder to follow along. And so for that, I do apologize. And that, of course, does not answer your actual question, I think. Ms. Norton?
No, it doesn't. So for myself and for the other board members, are we to be looking at the approved agenda and approving the recommendations, the ones that say, sorry, I'm toggling between two computers here. American Career College Anaheim Vocational Nursing Program. Please note, these are not NEC decisions. Deny American Career College. Place the program. We already noted that's an error because they're not even on provisional. And place the program on the November 20th? Or is it the deny the American Career College, require the program to demonstrate, place them on the November 20 budget or on the November 20th board meeting and require the program, blah, blah, blah. Are we actually looking at what is on 5CA or what is on the agenda for recommendations?
Ms. Norton, it should be, you're looking at the staff recommendations from the report. I made no change to the report after it was presented at the Education Committee.
At this point, I'm not even concerned about that. I just want to know which one should myself and the members of the public be looking at, because they are not the same. Are we approving 5CA on that document, or are we looking at the approved agenda item because the recommendations are not the same?
Ms. Norton, this is Ken. To answer your question about process, the motions coming out of committee were to approve or disapprove the recommendations of the NEC report. For clarity, the board has the option, if it wants to go from what's in the agenda, declining to consider the motion coming out of committee and simply make a motion regarding the recommendations as listed in the agenda. That process would allow you to avoid toggling back and forth between two documents. Does that answer your process question?
Oh, okay. Does no one else see that these are entirely different? It's going to come up in the next one very, very relevantly. So, okay, all right. I can get it. I don't understand why this is happening. So, but if we are on 5CA, are we going to take each one, so we're not going to approve the whole education and committee report. We're going to go by them individually? Is that the process we're going to use?
That is correct. The agenda item, the approved board agenda that lists it out, so 5C1, 5C2, et cetera, are the other items before the board.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very confusing. You know, I see there is a difference, and you know, at some point, are we going to address the recommendation made by the education committee? You know.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Mr. Turner, that is correct. The motion for the board is to rule on the NEC's recommendation on American Career College, 5C1. And there should be, I think, the recommendation that you do not need to go item by item unless the board wants to. The simple motion that the board's made before has always been, you know, to accept and approve the NEC's report and recommendations. And this is based on a out of committee.
Okay, if I would like to address a question to Ms. Norton, who's part of the Education Committee. There appears to be, correctly as you noted, a slight difference as to what is in the agenda and the report that received as part of the package. Is that correct? Ms. Norton?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, with the new items that were part of the staff recommendations, in your opinion, does that materially change how you view the motion that came out of your committee? Would it change the recommendations? Okay, I would now turn the gavel over to Dr. Mountain.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I guess then the question that I will ask is, I would ask the NEC, when we were in the Education and Practice Committee, there were 6 recommendations to deny the college, to require the program, to place the program, to require the director. I'm in support of those. On the approved agenda, they are different. So which one are we approving? I guess that's my question. Are we approving the one on the agenda, or are we approving the one that came out of committee? Because on the agenda, there will only be 3. And on coming out of committee, there were 6.
The motion coming out to approve the NEC's report and recommendation. So it is the report and recommendation that controls. So that's the document that's attached as agenda item 5C1 in this case. It's dated July 27th, 2020. So that's the report that the committee considered, and its motion coming out of committee relates to that report. So if the motion is to adopt that report, then that is what's being adopted and the recommendations therein.
So that will supersede then what is on the agenda. So we will not be voting what's on the agenda, we will be voting what's coming out of the committee.
Well, the board has, as I discussed earlier, but if the motion coming out of the committee is to approve and adopt the recommendations in the report, then the report controls. If it's the pleasure of the board to have a different motion relating to the recommendations as set forth in the agenda for this meeting, it could do that. And if it is a difficult process to flip back and forth between the documents because of limitations on computers, the board could decline to vote on the motion coming out of committee and make a new motion regarding the recommendations. However, the most efficient process, since these matters have already been before the committee, is to look to the reports from the NECs that are attached as agenda items for the individual schools, and that's what's voted on.
So if I just heard you correctly, you said the most efficient thing to do is to vote on the NEC recommendations that are attached to the agenda. Did I just hear you correctly?
Yes, I think that's
okay. So the problem that I'm having is that we are in the Education Committee report agenda item, and these are not the same. It's not a problem for me to flip back and forth. The problem is in the Education and Practice Committee, we had a discussion and one set of recommendations that we approved. They changed from the time of they changed in the last 2 weeks. So I guess just so that we can move on, I will ask Dr. Fairchild, why did she change her own recommendations?
Ms. Norton, my recommendations were not changed. My recommendations stand as they were presented at the Education Committee meeting.
Do you see that they are not listed that way on the agenda?
I do now. I had not noticed it previous.
Mr. Swenson, once again, what is the best way to proceed, please?
My recommendation is to vote on the motions coming out of committee, which were to approve or approve in part the recommendations coming out or from the NEC. So in this particular item, the motion was to approve the recommendation of the NEC in the report dated July 27th, 2020, that attaches an agenda item. So the way it's set forth in the agenda for today, for the board meeting, is a summary of what's going to be discussed, but it does not control what motion the board makes, or it doesn't alter the motion coming out of committee. It's a listing providing public notice of what items are going to be discussed and what recommendations are going to be discussed, so that the public is aware of that. The specific agenda items for the various schools are also available on the website. So that provides an additional basis, but the board itself is not bound by the description of the recommendation in the agenda for the board meeting. They can consider the motion coming out of committee, or it can make a new motion.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. That really helps. I want to know if there's any further comment about this from the board members and then from the public, please.
This is Paula Amizola, and I just want to make sure that I understand what I'm going to vote on. I am voting on the document 5.C.1 because that has the most accurate recommendations by the NEC. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, and that was recommended by the Education Committee to come to the board for acceptance.
One question then for the NEC. Looking at that document, there is I just wanted some the process of the recommendation. Under page 3, first paragraph, it states, when the program director requested the increase in size in January of 2020, the program had the resources to accommodate the increase in students. However, in page 2, staff recommendations, number 1, the recommendations to deny American College. And then in number 2, it says require the program to submit more documents. It seems to me that there's a recommendation to deny. However, there is a statement here that says that there was sufficient resources at the time in January of 2020. So why are we denying if there's why are we asking for more resource proof if there seems to be resources available for the students?
Thank you for your question. When the request was first received, the end of last year, in December of last year, and they submitted all of the documents, a site visit was made in February, they had all of the resources. Due to the displacement of clinical sites and the program being placed in a virtual setting for theory and limited on-campus interactions with the students for skills lab and simulation, a recommendation was made to deny the program the increase in students at this time until they can show that they are able to move back into the clinic settings for 50%, the recommended 50% of their clinical hours.
So what I'm hearing is that both statements are accurate. There was resources in January, and due to the pandemic, I'm just trying to understand, like, what's the thought here, the process. Can you repeat yourself, please?
Correct. They did have resources when they made their request. And then when COVID came in March, they lost their clinic sites. They are now starting to be able to move back into the clinic sites to meet the 50%. But until they are more in to make sure that they can accommodate 10 extra students for each clinical rotation that is needed for based on their program's instructional plan.
Thank you so much. One last question with on the same report. Further down, it talks about their class size, and it seems like they really never have reached their maximum number, which is 50. Is was there a reason given why they were requesting 10 more, given that their enrollment history doesn't even reach 50?
Yes, that is a question that I asked. They said that over the time they are now getting more students requesting to apply. Historically, if several years ago they did have larger numbers due to pass rates decreasing, decrease in students for applying, the numbers were decreased. Now their pass rates are up. They're seeing more students applying, so they are requesting to increase their numbers again.
Okay, did that help clear that up for you, Ms. Amazola? Ms. Amazola?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any public comments?
This is the moderator. I do not see any at this time.
I would like to take a roll call vote on American Career College accepting the recommendations of Dr. Fairchild, the nursing education consultant.
I
Ms.
beg your
Amazola-
pardon.
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Tom.
I beg your pardon, Madam Chair. Wouldn't we ask if a representative from the school is present?
Thank you so much. You're correct, Mr. Durking. Is there a representative from the school that would like to speak?
This is the moderator. I do see the director, Holly Long. I will unmute her microphone.
I also have Lauren Irvine, our Director of Accreditation, on the call as well. Are there any questions for us?
I see no raised hands from the board. Thank you so much for coming to this meeting.
Thank you for having us.
Sorry, this is Paula Amazola. I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you, am I speaking to a representative from American Career College?
I am the Director of Nursing at American Career College, and our Director of Accreditation and Licensing is on the call as well.
Great, thank you. Do you have any objections to the NEC's recommendation?
I do, however, we did display on multiple occasions that did not have the resources and are back at the clinical locations at least 50% of the time and do have the ability to place our students, including the increase of an additional 10.
Is there 2 people signed in to the meeting in your location? There's a lot of echo.
No, it's just myself.
Okay. Can you repeat your response? Sorry, it was really difficult to understand.
Okay, yes. Upon multiple requests, myself as the Director of Nursing here at American Career College Anaheim have submitted the expansion clinical documentation to prove that we had the resources available with the additional 10 students in the current pandemic situation that can accommodate the 50% on-ground clinical.
So the documentation has been submitted to the NECs demonstrating the resources available for taking on 10 more students.
Correct, on multiple occasions.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering the question. I would like to, that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Madam Chair, I have a question for the NEC.
I'm sorry, go
Yes,
ahead.
ma'am.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you. My question is, it sounds like the documentation was submitted. Was there a difficulty updating the report given the limitations of putting things together for us? Was it a delay of updating the report, or the information submitted was not sufficient to demonstrate? I'm trying to understand why the recommendation stands even after they submitted their documents.
The recommendation stands. The information came after the report was completed back in June to be able to go to the Education Committee. And the reason for not changing it is because this class that they're requesting will not start until January. A lot can happen between now and January, so I would like to just stay conservative.
I appreciate those comments, and being somebody who's dealing with clinical sites right now, a lot can change in a day.
Yes.
Are there any further questions? At this time, I'd like to call for a roll call vote. Ms. Amazola de Herrera.
Point of order, has anyone made a motion yet?
What I understood from Mr. Swenson is that the motion and the second were made in the Education Committee, and that at this time, we ask for comments from the board members, the public, we allow the school to speak, and then we call for a roll call vote. Am I correct, Mr. Swenson?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So back to the roll call vote. Ms. Amazola de Herrera.
I have not decided on my vote. Can I be skipped for I need to process all the responses?
Okay. Ms. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Durking.
Yes.
Mr. Maxey.
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Norton.
Yes.
Ms. Rubalcava.
Yes.
Ms. Turner.
Abstain.
Ms. Amazola de Herrera, do you need more time?
At this time, I will abstain too.
Okay, thank you. So since this motion is closed, we will move on to the next school report.
Madam Chair, Ken Swenson here.
Yes.
I wanted to note that there is a motion on this one coming from committee. The motion was as follows: to accept the NEC's report with the exception of items 4 and 6 and take the report to the full board for consideration. Also to recommend that the other items 4 and 6 be placed on the agenda for discussion at the full board meeting. That motion was unanimously approved by roll call vote at the July 27th, 2020 Education and Practice Committee meeting. It's reflected in the committee's report at page 4, in the middle of the page. So that is coming over from the committee as a motion. In addition, I would like to note that the specific recommendations that are being addressed in that motion are are available in the agenda item packet for this agenda item. And specifically, there's a set of recommendations from the NEC, which is the second document in that packet. I believe it's dated July 27th, 2020 as well. So that's where you'll find the listing of the recommendations. And then specifically, the motion was to approve those recommendations with the exceptions noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. I appreciate that. I would like to open this up for board questions to the NEC at this time. Ms. Amazola de Herrera, I see your hand is up.
I apologize. Didn't lower it in the past.
Okay. To the moderator, are there representatives from the school here? And would we like to start with them, or would we like to start with public comment?
This is the moderator. Yes, we do have representatives from the school.
Okay. Could they make their comments? I think they should probably go ahead and make their comments.
Director Larissa Ravinza, I am unmuting your mic.
Hello. My name is Larissa Revzina, and I'm a director of vocational nursing program in San Mateo, Górnik, since 2004. Unfortunately, our pass rate for the last 8 quarters did not meet the requirement for state board pass rate. We are working very hard to raise this passing rate and meet the requirements. I'm here with my assistant program director, Samantha Sanchez, and our representative, Ms. Ed Crump. Samantha Sanchez will present the information first, and then Mr. Crump will follow her presentation. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the board for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today. We at Górnik Academy of Medical Arts, we are committed to continuous review of our programs to strengthen and support our students. We have made all efforts and continuously doing those efforts from the faculty, staff, and administration, and have been focused on the implementation of changes and improvement to deliver the highest possible standard of resources and support for our students' success. Górnik San Mateo VN program has implemented those initiatives that we have submitted to you to improve the NCLEX pass rates. Thank you for hearing us. Thank you to the board. And we ask that the moderator will unmute Mr. Ed Cramp's mic. Thank you all.
This is the moderator. Mr. Cramp's mic is unmuted.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I would just like to note at the outset, looking at this process from the outside in as Górnik's counsel, I'm somewhat concerned that the Education Committee has made a recommendation to the full board here, and that we have what appears to be the staff going against that recommendation on 2 critical points. And absent from the record before you is the explanation of why the Education Committee did not vote for those 2 additional measures, those being specifically that there be the requirement that Górnik seek a prior approval from the board before starting its next class in January, and second, that the student-teacher ratio be altered from the regulatorily prescripted amount of 15:1 to 10:1. Neither of those, the argument that we presented to the Education Committee, and which all of you should have in a letter that I sent to your counsel, Mr. Swenson, last week, was that both of these measures are quite simply unlawful. The authorizing regulations for the committee, and I'm sorry, for the board, don't permit the board to place a restriction on the starts or to place a program, whether it is in a full status or if it's in some kind of a limited status. The requirement is that the program is permitted to start the number of students that it is authorized to do on a regular basis by the board. It doesn't there's just no authority to require a program to come to the board and seek prior approval before each start. And the same is true for the student-teacher ratio. So it really, to a certain extent, the fact that the staff is recommending these two actions when these actions are unlawful is really distressing. Moreover, it's important to note that these actions, at least the one with respect to the requiring the program to seek prior approval of starts, was initially instituted against this program in the form of a letter issued in June by the NEC to the program directly, indicating that the board had met and voted on this, when in fact now we know that there was no board meeting and the board conducted no vote. Now, we raised this all to the Education Committee and also pointed it out to them that this entire matter is currently the subject of litigation in the Sacramento Superior Court, and urged the committee to make the recommendation that it did. And now we see that despite that recommendation, the staff is still urging quite strongly in very strong language in the documents before you that that recommendation be discarded or ignored. And I think that's really problematic. And I'm not sure also that it is consistent with the notions of fairness and due process to this program. We appeared at the committee, we made our presentation. The committee accepted our positions on this, and now to see that process may be meaningless is really disheartening. So I would encourage the board to really think carefully before moving forward with this. Like many of the board members and their concerns, I also am quite confused about the process here. The agenda items appear to be erroneous in a number of respects, but to the extent that I can say this clearly, I would hope that the board will vote to accept the recommendation from the Education Committee and not to impose the unlawful requirements of asking the program to seek prior approval for starts or changing the student-teacher ratio. I'm happy to entertain any questions, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. I see Dr. Silverman has her hand raised.
Well, thank you for calling me Dr. Silverman, but I'm not doctor. But I appreciate the niceness. It's okay. The recommendations that came out of the Education Committee were to accept my recommendations, with the exception of recommendation 4 and number 6. And the Education Committee recommended there be a full discussion at the board meeting of those two items, not to totally discard them. And so I would like to explain why I feel that they are important. The recommendation number 4 is that the school should not admit an additional class without prior approval by the board, because it requires close monitoring when a school goes on provisional approval. And the ability for the NEC to be able to closely monitor a school is within the privy of all regulations. And to have the school submit documents so that the NEC can ensure that the school has enough resources and their NCLEX is going in an upward motion would be something that would the board would recommend, to have that school come before the board and have the NEC look at all these documents and to make a recommendation. Now, if they have enough resources and they have enough teachers and they have enough clinical sites and their NCLEX scores continue to move in an upward mobility of motion, then the NEC would have no difficulty recommending future classes as long as it was within their pattern of admission. As far as the staff recommendation of number 6, it is a lower ratio of student to instructors would allow each of the clinical instructors and the overall program to focus more currently on their current student enrollment. The program would be able to evaluate the interventions and implementations that are being made and to make any necessary changes to improve their NCLEX pass rate. The director of nursing said for the past 8 quarters, but the corrected is for the last 9 quarters, they have not been within compliance of the regulation, and they are below the 10% required by this board. So the average state, this program is below 10 percentage points below the average. Thank you.
Ms. Yamaguchi, I see that your hand is raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I wanted to just supplement to what Ms. Silverman was pointing out. In regard to the faculty ratio, our regs say that a maximum of 15-to-1 is our regulation, as our law, and it says maximum. So with what Ms. Silverman said, the logic of lowering that ratio, recommending a lowered ratio, is really, I believe, a very smart and very productive recommendation and entirely allowable by law. Basically, this allows them to work a little bit more intensively and closely with the students, which should improve their ability to pass the NCLEX. That's all, Madam Chair.
I'm going to recognize Ms. Norton. I want to support what Ms. Yamaguchi just said, that having been an educator for many, many years, that opportunity in clinical to work closely with the students comes with lower numbers. The other thing that needs to be taken into consideration is that when our regulations were written, having 15 students in a clinical group was probably more acceptable, although difficult, having worked teaching LVNs during that time when we did have 15. But the type of patient that we see now, their medical care is so much more complex that having a lower student to teacher ratio is required by many facilities and is the prudent thing to do. And so that recommendation, the school should consider embracing that as a standard within their school, as many other students in this state have already done that. So I just wanted to put that out there. Ms. Norton, you also have your hand raised. Ms. Norton, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. So I guess my question would be, so in the outset, let me just say that I'm not in favor at all of, and I don't want to give the impression that we as a board are not concerned with a school's ability to have effective pass rates. And it is on, this school has had 9 quarters. So that has to be said at the outset. And and my comments in no way reflect support for their pass rates. My question to Ms. Silverman is there, let me just put it this way. I am uncomfortable with this whole notion of whether it's legal or not. I read the regulation. I have read it so many times. And quite frankly, I have heard a board counsel's interpretation of that regulation. And I have heard Mr. Cramp's interpretation of that regulation. I do believe that we have regulations and that we have to be able to provide a framework, and that we must work within those regulations. Otherwise, why do we have them? So I am uncomfortable with my interpretation of that regulation, or I'm uncomfortable with the 2 different sides of that interpretation, but the regulation is there. And I'm wondering, is there a way, besides not allowing the schools to start a new class, and if we allowed them per the current regulation, that doesn't prohibit the NEC's ability to continue to monitor them. So what other mechanisms do we have? Can you have a recommendation that says prior to the start of a new class that there must be an evaluation? So then you're not acting outside of the regulation interpretation, but we're acting within it. So is that possible? The reason that the education committee the reason that we put these recommendations forward without number 4 and 6 was because we were uncomfortable making a decision there, and I'm no more comfortable now making it than I was at the Education and Practice Committee. So I'm looking for something, could we do otherwise? Is there an opening for that?
Hi, this is Faye. I actually made an alternative recommendation. If you look at page 4 of the addendum, and it basically states that prior to them starting a class, on the second week of the second month, they would have to submit the documents as listed, which would be the same documents that a class would have to submit to request a class start, but it would allow the NEC the necessary time to look through all their documents, and then the NEC would be able to bring that school to the education committee and or back to the board should all their documents not be in order. If they were in order, then the NEC would have the ability to say, go ahead and start your next class. But I strongly encourage the board. I feel that the board should want to see the school. I feel the board should want to see whether the NCLEX rates are going up. And I feel that the board should want to see that school to ensure that they have the right number of resources, both faculty and facilities, more now than ever. Thank you.
So I agree with you. I believe that the board does. I believe that the board does want to see. I want to see the school. I want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence. So it's not about whether or not we don't want to see the school. It's about whether or not we are proceeding with doing something that has been raised as being illegal. So I did see that alternative recommendation, and that was the reason that I asked. Is the alternative recommendation something that would be would that make you comfortable? Because does that then meet the need that you have? We can still place the school that is on provisional to have to come before the board. We can still follow them and monitor them closely without having this alleged illegal, and until we can get that straightened out by regulation or further discussion. So that would do what you need it to do, and that would do what we need it to do. Would that be correct?
That would be a board recommendation that the school would have to submit all necessary documents to be reviewed to their NEC or me prior to the second week of the second month prior to any board meeting. And this would not be just for the next class, but for each additional class. This would be required during their period of provisional approval to allow the NEC the adequate time each and every time they admit a class to go through documents to ensure that there's an upward mobility of their NCLEX score and to ensure that there's adequate resources, both faculty and facilities.
I see that Mr. Graham has his hand up and also Ms. Yamaguchi, so we will go in that order. Thank you, moderator.
Mr. Cram, your mic is unmuted.
Thank you, ma'am. So, I think that just to take Ms. Norton's words for a moment, these rules do exist for a reason, and they are in regulation, and they can't be ignored or gone around in a way that achieves the same unlawful outcome, but just dressed in different sheep's clothing, which is what I heard Ms. Silverman propose. It's not that the program has an objection to providing information. It's that the proposal places an unlawful condition on the program that doesn't exist and isn't permitted under the code. I mean, I know that the board members have read the code section, and as as Ms. Norton pointed out, very carefully, and the language there is very specific that a program may continue with its regular enrollments. The only restriction is that they can't admit new classes beyond the established pattern of admission previously approved by the board. So while, and look, my entire practice is in higher education as an attorney. It's all I do is work with colleges and universities, and there are lots of times that we might wish that the law was written in a different way or have an ideal version of things, but the law is what it is. And if the board votes to do something unlawful, it's acting outside of its authority, and that isn't the right outcome here. If knowing this institution, if a staff member needs information, they will provide the information requested, but placing unlawful conditions on an institution, in the way described is simply not going to get us there. As for, I believe Ms. Yamaguchi's comments about the student-teacher ratio, again, we may wish that the regulation provided authority to the board to set student-teacher ratios, but it doesn't. What it says is that the institution can have, no more than 15-1, and it doesn't provide discretion or authority to the board or the director or the supervising NEC or the NEC or anyone else to change that. And it may very well be that Gurnick decides that, we would like to lower our ratios because we think that's how we want to run our program. But if they do that, that's for them to decide. If they don't do that, then that's for them to decide. The authority just isn't there in the regulations. So I would just encourage you all not to take action that is outside the bounds of your authority under the law, because that will come with consequences. Thank you.
Ms. Yamaguchi?
Madam Chair, I would just reiterate that when regulations are written, generally they're to apply a limit. And we've always read that faculty-student ratio as a limit, a maximum. When it says up to 15, that means that there are reasons, and Mr. Cramp outlined quite a few of them, of when a lower ratio is appropriate. We would also maintain that a recommendation from this board, and it can be phrased as a recommendation or not a thou must, but we would agree that that regulation does allow for a lower ratio, and an NEC, in her expert opinion, should be permitted to make that recommendation of a smaller ratio. Beyond that, though, I wanted to defer to Mr. Swenson, if I may, about the other parts of this.
Thank you. The motion pending before the board is to approve and adopt the recommendations of the NEC, except for recommendation number 4 and 6. So that's the current motion pending before the board. Also coming over for committee was the referral of the other issues, recommendation 4 and 6, for discussion. So there have been legal arguments by Council for Gurnick during the meeting today that I would like to respond to. With regard to the new class starts, California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 2526.1, Subpart D, as in David, provides as follows. Any program holding provisional approval may not admit new classes beyond the established pattern of admission previously approved by the board. That's the provision that Mr. Cramp referred to earlier. That provision goes on to define admission pattern as the number of students per class and the frequency of admissions for the 6 class admissions that immediately precede the board action to consider provisional approval. This subpart prohibits a program from admitting new classes beyond the established pattern when a program is placed on provisional approval. However, it does not restrict the board's ability to take corrective action by requiring prior board approval before starting a new class. Nothing in that subpart restricts the authority of the board to take corrective action by requiring prior approval prior to starting a class. With regard to the instructor-student ratios for clinical experience, California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 2534, Subpart D, as in David, provides, quote, for supervision of clinical experience, there shall be a maximum of 15 students for each instructor, close quote. This subpart sets a maximum number of students per instructor at 15 students. However, it does not restrict the board's ability to take corrective action by requiring a lower student to faculty ratio for supervision of clinical experience. The language of the subpart contains no restriction. It simply sets a maximum. So I offer those comments about the regulations in response to the representation made by counsel for Gurnick, which are simply inconsistent with the language of the regulatory provisions and the longstanding interpretation of those provisions, which were authored by the board and promulgated by the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. Ms. Yamaguchi, you had your hand up for quite a while.
I wonder if I could ask a question of council. Is it allowable for the board to vote on the motion, the main motion, which would be 4 of those 6 recommendations forwarded by the NEC, and then separate that question so that the board may at its discretion discuss those other 2 motions, those other 2 recommendations in the context of Ms. Silverman's addendum? Is that permissible, sir?
Excuse me, that is permissible, and in fact, it would be the recommended procedure.
Can you please repeat that for clarity's sake so the board can move forward?
Yeah, so what I'm recommending is that the board vote on the motion brought over from committee to approve and adopt the recommendations of the NEC except for recommendation number 4 and recommendation number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. I don't see any other raised hands at this time. Oh, I do. Ms. Norton, do you have additional comments?
I have a question for Mr. Swenson. Listening to your interpretation of the regulation, if I understand you correctly, if I can paraphrase, for what you're saying is that the regulation doesn't, the regulation restricts the ability of the school to increase their admission if they're on provisional, but it doesn't in any way affect affect the board's ability to decrease if they're on provisional. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Ms. Yamaguchi?
My apologies, I'll lower my hand.
Oh. Ms. Amazola de Herrera?
I propose that we vote on the Education Committee recommendations, and then it's 12:30, and then we take a break and discuss item 4 and 6 of this recommendation by the NEC.
I have to defer to Mr. Swenson and say, is that the appropriate way to do this?
No, it's not.
I didn't think so. Okay. So but we will vote. I don't see any other hands. We will vote on the oh, I see another hand. Ms. Amazola, you still have your hand up. I would like to follow the procedure suggested by Mr. Swenson, that we vote on accepting this and discussing 4 and 6 at a later time. Is that correct, Mr. Swenson?
Yes, that's what I'm recommending, that we call the question with regard to the motion coming over from committee to approve and adopt the recommendations except for numbers 4 and number 6. Once that motion is voted upon, then the board can discuss the remaining recommendations. And if it intends to make action on those recommendations, a new motion would be required.
Okay, so let's take a roll call vote. I don't see any other hands. Oh, Donna, you have your hand up.
I do, because I'm confused. If I'm following this correctly, we want to take a vote on the recommendation coming out of the practice committee, which in essence leaves out number 4 and number 6. So we would be approving this without 4 and 6. And then we have a discussion about whether we want to include 4 and 6. And then we would take another motion, or we would make another motion to reattach 4 and 6. I'm confused.
That's what the procedure would be. The request before the board should be voted, and then the board can discuss the possibility of adding recommendations 4 and 6, and then if it desires, or if a board member desires, there can be a motion regarding those additional recommendations. But in essence, Ms. Amazola has asked for to call the question as regards to the motion coming out of committee, so that would be the proper procedure. That is to vote on that motion and then proceed with discussion on the other points.
So let's take a vote on the motion coming out of the committee, which was to accept the recommendations and to discuss 4 and 6 at a later time. Are we good with this? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Ms. Turner?
Yes. I think I understand the motion is to approve with the exception of 4 and 6. I vote yes.
Thank you, that is correct. Ms. Rubalcava?
Yes.
I'm sorry, was it yes?
Yes.
Ms. Norton?
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
And Ms. Amazola de Herrera?
Yes.
I think that we should probably take a 40-minute break We've been in session for almost 2 hours again. So can we reconvene at 1:20?
This is the moderator. We can do that.
All right. So we'll take a 40-minute break and we'll reconvene at 1:20. Thank you.